Welcome to Design Your Life in Business, the podcast for leaders by BrightMind Consulting Group. We give you the necessary tools to help you become the architect of not just your business, but your life too. I'm your host, Jevon Wooden. We're going to hop right into it with the first question I ask every guest. Who is Tony Martignetti?
Well, I'll answer in a very unique way because I feel like I'm unique in my own little way. I'm a curious adventurer. I'm someone who just loves to go on adventures, not just to your average places. Last summer, I climbed Kilimanjaro, which was quite a challenge. But I have a curiosity about people and places that is hard to quench. And beyond that, I'm also someone who loves to get into conversations that go deeper than just surface level. So I'm all about really understanding people's stories and what makes them tick. So that's my answer to who is Tony.
That's awesome, man. So I got to ask you, what made you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro?
Well, I wrote a book called Climbing the Right Mountain. And as I wrote the book, which is not about climbing mountains per se, but I finished up the book and someone asked me, what's the next mountain you're going to climb? And I started thinking like, well, I think Kilimanjaro is the next mountain. I said it. And then the next day I started planning it. And a year later I was there. And the reason why, I mean, I've always been attracted to mountains. I've been climbing mountains for all my life, but never to that scale. That's 19,000 feet. So it was a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You always hear people talk about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, in a kind of philosophical form. But you literally went to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, so that's pretty awesome, man. And you just mentioned your book, so what inspired you to write the book, and then what do you think would benefit readers most from reading it?
Yeah, what inspired me to write the book was really hearing the stories of people I was working with. Worked with a lot of professionals and people who are rising up to the C-suite and hearing their struggles to get to the top and all the sacrifices they made. And I kind of related it back to my own story of my journey through life. And I realized that there's a book in this that I wanted to share with other people so they don't have to struggle as much, and potentially they can reframe their thinking. The book is about, climbing the right mountain is not about like just getting on the right path. It's about really redefining what does success mean for you, and making sure you're not just prescribing to what societal norms of success are. We really need to sometimes check in with ourselves and say, what does it mean for me to become the person who I want to be, and why?
Yeah. Absolutely. And what are some recommendations you have for the designers listening on finding what that means and why?
Yeah. So first of all, it's really understanding, if you started the journey because you said, I want to make a lot of money, but make sure you think about, well, what goes along with that? Who is the person you want to be? It's almost like defining the sense of the feeling you want to have of being that person, so you can start to kind of connect with that future self. Now, I always think about it as almost like time traveling. So you have to be thinking, okay, here I am now. And for some reason I got on this journey. So I have to look back and think about who was I that got on this path, and then go in the future and say, who do I want to be in the future? And then come into the present and think, what can I do now to start acting and really connecting with that person? So there's a time traveling element to getting on this path.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, man. I always talk with my clients about, what can you do now that your future self will thank you for? So that's kind of along those same lines. So I love that. And you are a man of many talents, most of them dealing with purpose and really helping others. So can you briefly tell us about your journey? What inspired you to start your coaching practice, which is titled Inspired Purpose Coaching, and how you help others?
Sure. So I have had an interesting path. I'll start really early, but I'll go quickly.
Okay, no worries. This is your show, man.
Yeah, all right. All right. So as a child, I was an artist. I spent a lot of time doing drawings and paintings of different environments and worlds. And it wasn't your typical like child painting, stick figures and cats, dogs, and family members. It was a very different thing. And I was recognized by a lot of people saying like, wow, you got a talent. But then as I progressed on, a lot of people in my life told me, you've got to do something that's going to, pay the bills. You can't just be drawing all the time. So although I had aspirations to be an architect, they told me, maybe you should do something else. And I decided to go pre-med. So of course that made a lot of sense, right? From art to pre-med. So I did. I went into to study medicine, and then eventually switched out of that because, of course, it wasn't really the shoe didn't fit for me, and I decided to go into business. And as I graduated and got out into the real world, I spent most of my career working in biotech, in the finance and strategy area of the business, which was really cool because I was able to kind of connect with, some of my interests. But ultimately, I spent 25 years working in an industry that was amazing, but really I found out along the way that it wasn't who I was. People would tell me, hey, there's something about you that's different. There's something about, who you are and how you're showing up that doesn't really resonate with like the work you're doing. And I'm like, so a couple moments along the way. One was just getting really burnt out, trying to be something that I was not as I got closer to the top of my mountain. And then eventually a moment where I was sitting in a boardroom at a biotech company and realized this is my chance. I need to really, I need to connect with who I really am. And even though I was collecting a lot of money, had a good paycheck, I decided to walk out of the boardroom and decided to leave. I said, I need to do something that's more connected with who I am. As I sometimes refer to it as, I needed to leave the room to change the room. I saw leaders that weren't showing up for the right reasons. They were just doing it to protect their own image and not to really serve the people in the room. And so my calling was to do just that, is to change the way leaders show up.
And in your work, and thank you for sharing that, Tony. In your work, you talk a lot about connection. It seems to be like a cornerstone of what you do. And in our increasingly digital world, how do you foster that genuine, meaningful connection with like people you work with? Do you have any like connections, techniques you want to share? I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. And so I'll start with saying that the reason why connection is so important to me is because I felt like sometimes I didn't have that connection that I wanted. And when I started my business, before I answer your question, when I started my business, I had this tagline. My business was inspiration by through honest conversation. And the first honest conversation is with yourself and really understanding who are you and what do you want. But connection started to show up all the time through all the conversations I had, that people wanted to go deeper and I wanted to go deeper. And this actually has led to, even in the next few weeks, I'm actually doing a TED talk about creating deeper connection in the workplace. That's
Nice.
something.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you so much. But I would say the way that we want to create that is that, being in the Zoom world it's inevitable. We're going to be doing this. It's not like it's going away, but we have to find ways to connect with people both in person and on Zoom on a deeper level by asking questions that get past the surface. And one of the best ways we can do that is to, first of all, ask yourself, what is it about me that's unique and different that I'm not sharing, that I could share? So first, start to get curious about yourself and say, hey, what is it about me that I'm not, really being honest with other people about? And can I get comfortable with sharing that? And once you do that, maybe through those conversations, have a conversation about what it is that you want to ask other people about them. Like, what is it about you that makes you unique? What makes you weird in a good way, I like to say. Because what makes us weird is what makes us unique. And we need
Right.
people who are showing up that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we hear this buzzword authentic all the time, Right. Well, it looks like you got some thoughts on that. So go ahead, Tony. I
Well,
think you
yeah,
know where
I
I'm
mean, I
going with
think
that.
authentic has been such an overused term, but the idea is people don't really know what that means. So I think we
Right.
need to kind of take it to the next level, which is to say, hey, what are some interests that you've had that you think that make you like someone who other people might say, wow, that's interesting. Like if I were to say, like, ask you, what is something that you do on the weekend that you think nobody else does?
For me, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm kind of boring now, man. I just like to travel, weekend trips.
there you
That's
go.
probably it. Get up and go is my thing. I'll end up in from Houston to Seattle in a weekend. Me and my lady would just do things like that. So that's probably one of the interesting things for me.
Yeah, some people would be like, that would drive me nuts, like going
Yep.
in the car or, or getting on a plane or something like that. But, that's a cool thing. So for example, I like to do glass blowing. That's something that just kind of
Wow.
like got interested in because there's something about that which is really different. And I just started to experiment with it. Different things like that, just to try different things and see what happens. It makes things more interesting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I might have found one of the most interesting men in the world that I'm talking to right now in Tony. So glass blowing. Wow. It is an interesting art. I mean, I went to Egypt and had the privilege of watching them create all those containers and stuff. It is an
Yeah.
interesting sight to behold. And it takes a lot of talent
Yeah.
and patience for sure.
Mm,
I'm
perfect.
wondering when do you even find time for that, Tony? Because you got books out, you're climbing Kilimanjaro. So how do you balance your time?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to live a life that lights us up, and I think that's what inspiration is all about is lighting us up. We have to make sure we create an intentional life. We have to make space for the things that matter most, and so that's what I've done is I've created and designed a life that is aligned with who I want to be. And sometimes I get out of alignment. That's natural. So I always check back with myself and say, how do I ensure I'm getting back on track? In fact, I'll just share this one tip that I often have for people is that I do this thing called the weekly spark, which is once a week I look at the past week and I look at the next week and I look at how things are playing out. So I'm not just kind of robotically going through my weeks. I'm making sure that I'm planning into my week's time for things to excite me, things that make me come alive. If we're going through our days and all we're doing is stuff that we dread, then that's just a sure sign that we're heading towards burnout
Right.
and not a good place. So if we want to turn things around, we got to start thinking more intentionally about what am I putting on my calendar? Is this feeding me? Is it not feeding me? And how can I change the course that I'm on?
You have this concept called the fulfillment mindset. Can you
Yeah,
explain what that means to you and like how it can change the
of course.
approach?
Yeah, and I think the starting point of this is that this idea that fulfillment is not a destination; it's a mindset. It's a place to come from, and it's really knowing that there's no one outside of you that's going to hold the keys to your fulfillment. It's about how you look at life and how do you ensure that you know what it is that you want and that you're ensuring that you're surrounding yourself with the things that fill you up. If, for example, fulfillment to you is defined based on, hey, I won't feel fulfilled unless I have the people around me that fill me up. So what happens is you start to create that container for having your family and friends around you, and that becomes fulfilling. But it's the mindset of, this is how I create my life instead of I'll be happy when or I'll be fulfilled when I get to that place. It can't be
Right.
that place of like, moving towards a destination. It has to come from a place of I'm fulfilled because I create this.
And that's awesome how you worded that. But what I hear in there is this concept of change too for a lot of our designers listening. So
Mhm.
how do you recommend someone navigates the change that they will need to go to reach that fulfillment
Mm.
mindset?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're hitting your head against a wall and feeling like, I can't change or there's things aren't working for me, first stop because there's an element of you can't change if you're still doing the things that you're doing. So take a pause and let yourself scan the landscape. I like to say, like, expand your vision, allow yourself to see bigger, because the possibilities of what you want to create are probably on the horizon. You haven't seen it yet. So expand your vision first. And then once you've seen where you want to go, like what the path is that you want to take, then you can start to narrow your focus and see, okay, this is the thing that I need to do next to create that thing that I want. So expand, then narrow. It's the path to be able to getting to that change you want to create.
Love it. Start where you are and don't stress, right? And have some fun with it. Don't focus so
100%.
much on the work all the time, right? So I love that, man.
Yeah.
Narrow and expand. Yeah, that's dope.
Mhm.
So you also host a podcast called the Virtual Campfire Podcast, and I'm sure that you've interviewed some amazing people. Are there any like insights that you would like to share with the listeners from all those leaders and stuff you've interviewed?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's a topic of one of my upcoming books that will be out maybe later in 2024. We'll see.
Nice.
But it's called Campfire Lessons. And the idea behind it is that, over 200 people have been on the show. There's been some really incredible people from all different walks of life, from artists to, business leaders to authors and what have you. And what I found is there's a few key lessons that I've learned. And one of them I'll share is that, like, even in the darkest of moments, we can learn that there's light, right? We can take our most traumatic events and turn them into something powerful to use to help other people, right? That's one example. Another example is that, we don't have to go it alone, right? There's a lot of stories that I can share from people who've been on the show who, like, they found that by connecting with the right communities, they were able to get a lot of more potential and unlock their own potential because they were in the right community. So make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people who see you and believe in you to get where you want to go.
Yeah, and I can attest to both of those, man. Like doors started opening as I became more transparent. And I always say vulnerability is strength, right? As I started sharing my story, people started reaching out like, hey, man, I'm glad you shared that. Now I feel like I can go talk to someone. I can go get help for whatever I'm going through. And then that second part, finding that community, finding your people is super paramount, right? When it comes to that support and leveling up to wherever you want to go, to what we talked about earlier, that future self, right? It's just you might have to pay for that community. You might have to invest, right? And that's okay. So it is what you want it to be, because you're going to invest either your time or your money, right? You're going to invest something if you want to really achieve different levels. So those two lessons are, I've learned the hard way, unfortunately, but I learned them.
Yeah. Well, and then it comes back to what we were saying earlier, is that when you find the right people, then you can connect deeper, right? And you start to build relationships that will help you to see yourself more fully, right? And understand how you impact others. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a part of that inspired life that you often talk about, right? So tell us, what does that look like for you? What's an inspired life for Tony?
Yeah, I'm glad you said it. What does it look like for me? Because it's different for everyone, right? It's going to depend on, like, what is your definition of what your life looks like when it's on fire. And I say that, like, this sense of an inspired life is when you have found what it is inside of you that makes you come alive and that you are expressing it fully. I often think of it as people walking around, and I'll share my vision of that in a moment, but people walk around and they're just feeling like they're going through the motions. But my job is to help them to light that up and express themselves, to make what's inside come outside. I don't mean that in any gross way. I mean, like, their ideas.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But I think for me, it's really my sense of an inspired life is the ability to connect with people and see them sharing their ideas on a larger platform to create connections with others that allows them to expand and see more possibilities in what they're doing. And so I know that seems like it's very outward focused, but that's kind of what I feel like my purpose is all about, is to be able to be in connection with others and to see their ideas bouncing off of other ideas and creating bigger, new potential things in the world. So,
And I can hear the artist in you as you talk about those things, connection, and you use words like expression, things that artists and creatives tend to focus on,
yes.
expressing themselves outwardly, right? So everything that you're talking about really plays into the fact that what you told us earlier, you wanted to be an artist and you found a way to do that. So kudos to you, man, for doing it in a way that also serves and transposes other people's lives.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you recognize that, because there's something about that, which was when I did step off that corporate ladder and felt like, man, like I can be more fully me. And I felt like there was a weight lifted, but also a sense of people seeing me more fully. And I think it still happens more and more every day. I'm starting to be more expressive of myself, which is fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, for our listeners for the designers who are like, man, this all sounds great, but I don't know the next steps of my career, of my life, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So, first of all, start with yourself. Ask yourself the hard questions and be honest. Have that first honest conversation with yourself. What do you want? What do you truly want in your life? Right. And when you do that, that inner curiosity will spark the next outward courage to have the conversation with other people.
That's powerful. That conversation is the hardest conversation you will have.
Mm.
Every time I sit down and speak with myself, I'm like, man, this is tough, but it's necessary, man. You unlock so much more when you do that introspection. Not just sit down there for a minute, but actually go deep and, like you said, be honest with yourself. You will uncover a ton, and it'll make you feel lighter too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely listen to that, designers.
I will add one more thing too, which is to say that, one of the biggest challenges with, once we know what we want, we can ask for it. And that's the challenge, is people out there are willing to help. The problem is we have a hard time asking for help because we don't know what we truly want.
Right. Right. That's so true. That yeah, I can attest to that one for sure. So what's next on the horizon for you, man? You've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. You've written books. You got another book coming out. What is next?
A long sleep. No, I'm kidding.
So yeah, I'm
Um,
sure you need it after climbing the dang on mountain.
no, I mean, I think for me, I want to do more in-person retreats and get people together to do things where they can experience connection in person, whether it be someplace local or someplace more extravagant. I think that's really on my bucket list. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or a year from now, but that's where I'm headed. I've got an idea of a summit that I'm creating in 2024.
Nice.
That is geared towards people connecting and sharing stories about how they've come to be who they are. And it's going to be very intimate, but the thought is that this could change the way people interact with each other.
Oh, it will, man. So yeah, definitely keep me posted on that one. That sounds amazing. So whenever you
Yeah.
get it going, which I know you will, you said you're not figuring it out yet, but you literally said, "Hey, I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro," and you planned it the next day. So, all right, man, we're going to switch to our by design segment where I ask every guest the same 3 questions. You ready, Tony?
I think so.
You got this. You got this. All right. So, what has been the hardest part about designing a life and business you don't need a vacation from?
The hardest part is letting go of my past self, letting go of the demons that held me back.
That one's deep. That was deep right there. All right.
Mm.
Number 2, what is the best lesson you've learned from your entrepreneurial journey?
It's a quote I'll share. That amateurs compete and professionals create. It's a sense of tapping into abundance, because the reality is if we work together, we create something more powerful as opposed to competing against each other and trying to narrow the pie, if you will.
I love that. I always talk about collaboration is over competition. So I'm going to use that quote from you, Tony. Thanks for
Mhm.
sharing that one.
You
Number
bet.
3, what are 3 tools or tips that you would recommend when scaling a business?
Oh, a great question. First of all, try to use a flagship client. If you're just getting started, have a client or a customer who is there from the get-go, who you give them like an inside look at your business. Allow them to feel special, right? So they're a flagship. Number 2 is talk to other people and see if there's other people in your arena who are willing to partner with you, collaborate. And number 3, build your thought leadership. So find out what it is that's your way of speaking into the world and do more of that, because people want to hear your message. And the more authentic, and not to kind of, utilize that too much, but the more real your message is, the more likely people are going to say, yeah, I need a part of that. I want to be part of that movement that you're creating.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. You've shared so much value, and those 3 are definitely key. So I appreciate you sharing those. How can the designers connect with you?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, this has been a great conversation. So I got to thank you. The best way people can find me is on my website, inspiredpurposecoach.com. You can find a bunch of stuff there. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So if you want to look for me, there is another Tony out there with the same last name. So look for the bald guy.
I love it. We share that. We have that in common, man. I knew there was a reason why I liked you.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Hey, designers, remember, keep ascending. Tony, I appreciate your time, man. I look forward to seeing what you have going on. I'll speak to you soon, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Design Your Life and Business, the podcast for leaders, is brought to you by BrightMind Consulting Group. To find out more about BrightMind Consulting Group and how you can become the best leader possible, visit brightmindconsultinggroup.com. Make sure you search for Design Your Life and Business on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at BrightMind Consulting Group, we cannot thank you enough for listening.